For hundreds of years, the criminal justice system has developed, relied on, and advanced a body of rules and procedures designed to ensure that at the end of the day, the guilty are convicted and the innocent are acquitted. Greater society has put an immense amount of faith into the criminal justice system in handling wrongdoings, the deviants, or more serious, the criminals. Yet, available evidence and increased awareness on wrongful convictions has opened a window through which we can question this faith in the system. This window reveals errors and failures in the criminal justice system. It is apparent throughout the interview responses, people recognize the cruelty, injustice, and corruption that exists among our criminal justice system, while we discussed what exactly a wrongful conviction was. If you were to define wrongful convictions in few words possible, what would you say?
I would say that it is immoral.
Nonsense. Life-changing. Cruel.
Undeserved no matter who you are.
Torture.
Systemic.
Failure. Absurd.
Unacceptable.
Unfortunate. Wrongfully accused.
Alright, so I was asked how to define wrongful conviction, and in my opinion that means that you are given one shot in life to do all the things that you were meant to, and if you were ever a victim of a wrongful conviction, all that life and time just goes to waste. And you never might know what your full potential was.
Unlawful.
Unlawful. Intolerable.
Corruption in the criminal justice system.
Unjust.
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 Police, lawyers, judges, juries, and other experts are all major players in the case of a wrongful conviction. Although these justice officials often suppress the significance of a wrongful conviction and even stress that wrongful convictions are rare occurrences, there are many people in prison who insist they are innocent, hoping their claim will earn their freedom. It has been reported by American criminologists that between 1% and 5% of prisoners may be wrongfully convicted, translating to approximately 6,000 cases per year. Looking at this statistic from a smaller scale, let's take our class of 40 people. 2 of them will be wrongfully convicted. The problem is, wrongful convictions have become an accepted reality in most areas. It is with high-profile cases that not only tend to draw our attention to the detrimental effects of a wrongful conviction, but also point out how aspects of the criminal justice process has failed. The rest of this video will explore the case of Tammy Marquardt, who was a young mother accused of killing her son and essentially a victim of wrongful conviction. Tammy Marquardt was born in Toronto, Ontario. Tammy was raised by her mother and as a teen suffered sexual abuse by her mother's boyfriend, causing her to leave the home at 17 years old. In the summer of 1990, Tammy was 19 when her and her boyfriend, Robert Nelson, were expecting a child. Tammy's relationship with Robert did not last long, but on May 18, 1991, their child, Kenneth, was born. Tammy married another man by the name of Rick Marquardt just before Kenneth's second birthday. Rick was abusive to both Tammy and the baby, to the point Tammy put him in the care of Children's Aid Society for 3 months in order to protect him. In addition to the abuse, Kenneth suffered from a number of serious health issues, including asthma, pneumonia, and epilepsy. These conditions caused several severe seizures, causing Kenneth to be hospitalized multiple times over the course of his life. On the afternoon of October 9, 1993, Tammy went to check on Kenneth after thinking she heard him calling her. When she got to the bedroom, she found the baby tangled in the sheets, gasping for breath and in obvious distress. She tried unsuccessfully to free him before calling for an ambulance. The 911 operator instructed her to perform CPR, but she was unable to calm herself sufficiently to follow the instructions. The emergency crews arrived and took Kenneth to the hospital, where he was revived, but tragically, the doctors determined that he had suffered irreparable brain damage. 3 days later, Kenneth was taken off life support and passed away. Dr. Charles Smith was considered to be the leading expert in Canada on criminally suspicious pediatric deaths. He was responsible for performing Kenneth's autopsy. Dr. Charles Smith concluded that Kenneth's death was not accidental. He insisted that the cause of the death was asphyxia and surmised that Kenneth's death was caused by strangulation or smothering. On November 23, 1993, Tammy was charged and arrested for the second-degree murder of her son, Kenneth. Tammy was tried by judge and jury in Whitby, Ontario. Again, Smith insisted that the cause of the death was asphyxia and concluded that Kenneth's death was caused by strangulation or smothering. Smith's testimony was central to the prosecution's theory, which stated Tammy had suffocated her son in a moment of frustration. In the eyes of the Crown, Tammy was a young mother with limited financial resources, parenting, and coping skills, who was involved in an unstable relationship with Kenneth's stepfather, Rick. Smith pointed to small red spots on the organs and tissues that had not yet been donated as proof of his theory. The Crown further relied on the testimony of several children's aid workers to lend circumstantial support to Smith's conclusion. Tammy testified in her own defense and insisted that she was innocent, a position she unwaveringly maintained throughout her ordeal. The defense argued that Kenneth had died during an epileptic seizure, but they called no medical expert of their own to support this theory. Perhaps not surprisingly, the jury accepted the Crown's theory, and on October 24, 1995, Tammy was convicted of Kenneth's murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 10 years. On January 22, 1998, Tammy appealed her conviction to the Ontario Court of Appeal. However, it was dismissed by a unanimous court. In addition, Legal Aid Ontario refused to provide her with further funding, thus she was unable to complete an application to appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada. Having lost her son and her case, Tammy languished in prison. Marquardt maintained her innocence, and while she was incarcerated, Charles Smith was beginning to be discredited and doubted. His findings were being called into question in a number of criminal cases for which he had provided expert testimony against the accused. In 2004, Tammy applied to AIDWIC, which is now known as Innocence Canada, for assistance. AIDWIC successfully urged a full public inquiry into Smith's work on behalf of Marquardt and other wrongfully convicted in connection with Smith's autopsies. Although the process was slow, on June 7, 2005, Marquardt had some success, as a formal review would be conducted of criminally suspicious child deaths for which Smith had performed the autopsy. In October 2007, a report was released pursuant to the review of Smith's findings in Kenneth's autopsy. It stated that Smith's finding of asphyxia was illogical and completely against scientific, evidence-based reasoning, and that there is not sufficient evidence for the diagnosis of asphyxia to be made. A further review was conducted that concluded that Smith had wrongly attributed Kenneth's death to homicidal asphyxia, and that Kenneth may have died during an epileptic seizure or from other natural causes. On February 10, 2009, armed with these findings, AIDWIC brought an application for leave to appeal Tammy's case to the Supreme Court of Canada. This request was granted, and on March 12, 2009, Tammy was released, custody pending the decision on her application for leave to appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada. On April 30, 2009, the Supreme Court of Canada issued an order remitting the case back to the Ontario Court of Appeal for consideration of the fresh evidence and a determination of whether Tammy's conviction constituted a miscarriage of justice. On June 7, 2011, the Ontario Court of Appeal overturned her conviction and ordered that a new trial be held. The trial never occurred as the Crown withdrew the charges against Tammy, based upon the reviews of Kenneth's autopsy and the implications of the new findings. After nearly 14 years, Marquardt was finally free from the possibility of a further wrongful conviction.
And we will listen in live.
Tammy, does moving on with your life, does it include seeing anything happen with Dr. Smith?
Thank you. That's okay, thank you.
Pardon?
I'm wondering, as you move on with your life, would you like the authorities to look more at Charles Smith? Do you think enough has been done in dealing with just what he wrought?
I don't think anything could vindicate. He has to live in his own personal hell. So I don't think there's anything really that could, that I or anyone else could do.
What would you say to him if you could talk to him? Tell him. What would you say to him after what you said to your life?
Well, I can't say this on television. But yes, I would ask him what he thought he was doing, who he thought he was, and why. Why did you do it? What possessed you to play God? You know.
You mentioned earlier in the press release that you felt like your son was grieving. How would you explain that for you?
Well, all these years, I don't feel that Kenneth has been able to rest in peace because of everything that's been going on. Like, now he's finally able to be at rest.
Tammy, tell us what this whole process is.
Took away a big portion of my life, took away my life with my children, took away my ability to grieve, my freedom, my mentality. It really took a big chunk of my soul.
How do you deal with that day to day now?
Well, with the love of my friends and family.
I see your tattoo says freedom. Does it mean more today than it did when you first got it?
Definitely. Now it's true freedom.
Clearly, the overriding cause of Tammy's wrongful conviction was the evidence provided by Charles Smith. Smith had neither formal forensic pathology training nor board certification in that field. In addition to being unqualified to do the autopsy work on which he spent so much time, Smith was a terrible expert witness. He consistently gave misleading statements and at times told outright lies on the witness stand. Smith was known for developing judgments on parents, particularly mothers, who did not meet his parenting standards. This included those with low socioeconomic status, those who had frequent encounters with social assistants, single mothers, and those unemployed. This is linked to the think dirty approach, where Smith approached every sudden and unexpected child death as a possible case of child abuse. It is safe to draw the conclusion that Smith used this think dirty approach in the case of Marquardt. Marquardt, being a mother, having experienced 2 broken relationships and being in contact with Children's Aid Society, Smith arguably used her social history against her and categorized her as a dangerous mother. Thus, she was held accountable for the death of her child. If not for Charles Smith, it is unlikely that Tammy would have spent almost 14 years in prison for a crime that never happened. That said, there were other factors that contributed to her wrongful conviction. The jury heard a considerable amount of evidence regarding her demeanor at the hospital, Kenneth's funeral, and upon her arrest. If this unreliable evidence were led at a trial today, it would likely be ruled inadmissible. In addition, while the trial judge instructed the jury not to place any weight on this evidence concerning the appropriateness of Tammy's emotional reaction, the fact is that they heard countless witnesses recount and opine on how an innocent, grieving mother should react to losing her child. Further, the fact that the defense did not call its own medical expert to testify at trial in support of their theory that Kenneth died as a result of an epileptic seizure was also very problematic. Marquardt had the misfortune of having Kenneth's autopsy performed by now infamously disgraced pathologist Charles Smith. In fact, not only was Marquardt a victim of Smith's misconduct, discrimination, and mishandling of evidence, but Smith was associated with a number of erroneous cases, including the famous case of William Mullins Johnson and Brenda Wadby. Shockingly enough, as mentioned earlier, at one time Smith was considered a renowned expert on criminally suspicious pediatric deaths. He was even considered a leading pediatric forensic pathologist, even though he didn't have legitimate training in the field. His work was scrutinized, but despite the fact that he kept making large errors, he was still allowed to practice for what I would say is too long. For heaven's sakes, he continuously provided inadequate reports, rarely attended autopsies, and based his conclusions off of crime scene photos. He relied heavily on social history of persons' interests and failed to report information and even misplaced or lost evidence. There is simply no justifications for Smith's mistakes and actions. Looking into the bigger picture, like the Gouge Inquiry does, criticisms must be extended to Smith's superiors and to a system that allowed his actions to continually be unchecked. Not only was the pathology flawed, but so too was the system which failed to ensure its quality. One man I interviewed said it best: with police, lawyers, judges, juries, and experts like Smith being active participants in wrongful convictions, it is obvious there is
corruption in the criminal justice system.